Finley to throw. Over the middle, intercepted. Wolford again. Wolford the other way at the 30, the 40. Wolford to midfield. Miles Wolford with the pick, the heels on the doorstep of an enormous victory. Williams is the running back next to Howe. Play action. Howe will now lob it down the near side. Newsom with a man all over him. Pins the ball against the back of the defender and brings it in. Heels can get a first down at the 3. Howe, pump fake to the right. Now he's going to run to the left. Howe at the 5, takes the shot. Pinballing off the chains for the touchdown. Showing the toughness for 6.
Orioles down 4, 35-31. May has the shotgun snap. Pressure coming. Rolls to the right.
Goes to the end zone. Touchdown! Touchdown, Antoine Green! 16 seconds to go. No flag.
Snapping it off the 8-yard line. May pulls it, tries to roll to the far side.
Now he's going to throw it and score! Christian May throws it to Paystor in the end zone for the touchdown. They are from the play through left-handed. Was rolling out on the run and threw it left-handed. Bernard fields it at the 26. Heading to the far side. Gio at the 35. Gio, he's at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Gio, he's going to take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me?
What's going on, guys? Welcome into another edition of the Heel Tough Blog podcast. It's your host, Anthony Pagnotta, here with you guys as always. And tonight it is time to look back at Carolina's game against the Wake Forest Demon Deacons, one that did not go the Tar Heels' way. On the road, they fall 28-12 to Wake Forest. And so we're going to dive into everything in that game, from the weird touchdowns to start out, to defensive struggle for Carolina, some issues again on the offensive side of the ball, what's fueling that. And we have to have a conversation about whether or not this game really took away all the momentum that Carolina had been building during the previous 4 weeks, because there are some people that are saying today that we should be just as miserable as we were after the Clemson game. So should we actually be at that point after this loss to Wake Forest? We'll dive into that all here on this edition of the podcast tonight. But as I mentioned, let's start with the two scores that I think really changed the game right out of the gate. And I think, the first one was definitely the one that I think set the tone for the entire day. That would be a 51-yard fumble recovery for a touchdown by Carlos Hernandez, the wide receiver for Wake Forest, the guy that Carolina simply had no answers for the entire afternoon, but especially on this 51-yard fumble recovery for a touchdown, where pretty much everybody on Carolina's roster had dived to the ground to try to get the ball. The ball squirts out and somehow gets all the way to Hernandez, who was in the center of the field after it was fumbled on the outside of the right hash mark. The ball bounced that far, and he ends up picking it up and taking it into the end zone. A 51-yard fumble recovery that Carolina unable to bring him down on, and that really set the tone. Carolina goes down 7-0 right there. They were trailing the entire game from that point on, and never really got their legs underneath them. And then you go to the second touchdown that was a little bit awkward, and that would be the 12-yard touchdown run by Damon Claiborne. Nothing weird about that play, but that was after the Tar Heels appeared to have a fourth down stop earlier in the drive. Looked like they were off the field. Multiple angles showing on the broadcast that it looked like Robbie Ashford did not get the first down, but because they chose not to blow for forward progress, blow the whistle for forward progress, it ends up that he picks up the first down according to what they saw on the field. There wasn't enough evidence to overturn it. And so those were the first two touchdowns of the game. And I really thought set a bad precedent for this Tar Heel defense, which never really seemed to recover from those two touchdowns early on in the game. And I think that is why you sit here today with a loss at the hands of the Wake Forest Demon Deacons. A crazy play and a little bit of help from the referees.
Yeah, I think the one that's really most dumbfounding is the first one, and not just because of the nature in which Wake Forest scored, but you look at the two previous plays that led to that play. You had a third down where Carolina had a terrific shot to get off the field and they missed a tackle. And then the very next play, you had a chance to, I believe they had a sack opportunity. You whiff on that, and then, Robbie Ashford, was able to make something out of nothing. But if he gets sacked, I just don't think the next play that happens that sets up the touchdown we're going to happen. And that's, to me, what set the tone for what became, I think, the best way to categorize it. Like, for me, I was disappointed and somewhat frustrated with the loss on Saturday afternoon because just the way Carolina played. They played really well for the previous month. They had 2 wins and 2 losses. And I felt like they were nowhere near that same level of team on either side of the ball on Saturday afternoon. And it started from the opening drive because those were plays, especially that third down play, that Kamori House the previous month, he makes that tackle. And Carolina gets off the field and they get the football. And with the game that we knew was going to be played the way that it was played, I mean, those points were, those were game-changing. And those 2 plays, those 2 drives could end up being the difference between this team making a bowl game or not. And I don't want to exaggerate that, but that's how thin the margins are here with the way that Carolina is constructed. So, I thought they competed, and there were still points in time, I thought, in the second half, if they were ever to put together a drive offensively, the game was there to be won, because I don't think Wake Forest is 16 points better than Carolina is. I truly don't. But they did the one thing better than we did, which was first they got to the red zone, and then they converted in the red zone. Carolina could move the ball from our 20 to their 30, but it was like once we got on the outside of the red zone, our offense just stalled. And we knew going into the game field goals were not going to win it. And obviously that was certainly the case. And so we'll talk about it as the night moves on. I don't think this undoes all the progress Carolina made the previous month because Wake Forest is a good football team. They're a blown call and a blown lead away from being, 9-1 with 2 weeks left to go here in the regular season. But, it does show you that Carolina's got a little bit ways to go, and now they have their work cut out for them if they want to make that all-important bowl game.
Yeah, and I think, that play that you talked about really set the tone because, as you said, the previous 2 plays, you go back to last week, and Kamori House is making that play. And for some reason, during this game, the missed tackles cropped up again. That's the one thing that I thought was behind this team that I really thought they were going to be able to carry over into this game was they were going to be able to tackle well. And the thing is that they only missed 11 tackles in this game, but it felt like every missed tackle was a critical one. It felt like it led to a big play. And so that was what was most concerning. And it was right off the rip. Carolina with 2 great chances to bring Robbie Ashford down, and Kamori House misses 2 tackles. The third down play, I don't remember if it was actually Ashford that he had a chance to bring down there. But he literally just runs right by the Demon Deacon with the football, and it leads to a first down play. Carolina on third down, that was another area that I didn't even, put down on here as an area where Carolina really struggled. But 6 of 13 for Wake Forest on third down. That's a pretty successful night, especially for a Wake Forest offense that have been struggling on third down coming into the game. So, this is certainly, something that Carolina can look back on and feel like was a missed opportunity, because I think you're right. And part of it was that you did score the late touchdown, so it ended up becoming a 16-point game. But I don't think that Wake Forest is even 9 points better than Carolina They based off of what we saw, it took a fluke touchdown. It took a little help from the refs to be able to extend the lead to that point. So I think, from Carolina's perspective, if you were able to score the ball in the red zone, that certainly would have helped. That was, one of the biggest issues for Carolina all night. I mean, you talk about it, and we can focus on that here for just a second. I mean, I wrote it down. The inability to score touchdowns and block field goals were killers for Carolina. 6 trips inside of the Wake Forest 40 and came away with 6 field goal attempts. That's just unacceptable. For Carolina, you've got to be able to move the ball completely down the field and find a way to put it into the end zone. And I mean, the thing is that Carolina wasn't even reaching the red zone. They couldn't even get that far down the field. So a lot of these field goals were from long range, and you could see why some of these balls had to be driven a little bit, lower, and why it was easier to block those field goals. But I mean, a guy, Nick Anderson, literally just leaps over the line of scrimmage and blocks the field goal. Not really much that you can do on that one. That's just a freak athletic play from a guy that, as I told you coming into this game, is a really good player in the ACC, but the other one's inexcusable. That's one where you've got to be able, especially after having one blocked earlier in the game, you've got to get your hands on these opposing defensive linemen and prevent them from being able to jump the way that they did on that play to be able to block that kick. And if you're Reese Verhoff, you got to put just a little bit more arch on that in order to get it over that defensive line, especially after you had one blocked earlier in the game. So, I mean, yeah, for Carolina, the kicking game wasn't perfect. Wouldn't have mattered even if it was, though, because even if the game is, 21-18, Carolina would not have had the football because Wake was able to run the football so successfully. And we'll talk about that here in a second. But when we talk about Carolina's inability to score touchdowns, I mean, it's just weird how all of a sudden they got inside of the Wake 40-yard line, and it was like a switch went off, and this team just completely forgot how to play football and how to move the ball further down the field. I mean, that's a huge concern for this team, especially going into these final 2 weeks where they're going to play some defenses that are struggling, that aren't nearly as good as Wake Forest. But I don't think you can give all the credit to Wake Forest defense for this one. I think the combination of play calling and the lack of play making from guys like Gio Lopez and some of the wide receivers have to come up here.
Yeah, I think it was really the limitation of your quarterback on display in a full manner. Wake Forest did not respect their ability to drive the ball down the field the closer they got to the red zone and the more the field condensed. They were content with letting Carolina move it, as you mentioned, to their 40-yard line inside of it. But pretty much from then on, they were able to put the clamps down because your quarterback can't throw the football downfield. He had to throw to the end zone to, I can't remember if it was Pacer or if it was Jordan Shipp.
Pacer.
I'm not saying, Nathan Elliott makes that pass, because that's the kind of pass you got to make to play quarterback at this level. And we've got so accustomed to seeing that, and now we haven't been able to see that. And you really, first off, you learn to take those guys more for granted than you even did when they were wearing the Carolina uniform. But it really showed up in a big way on Saturday. Carolina was able to win their games previously without, scoring touchdowns as conveniently as you would like to be, because the opponents weren't going to pose the challenge that Wake Forest has. And they couldn't do defensively to Carolina what Wake Forest was able to do. And so, we've had this ongoing conversation about Gio all year long. It started from the TCU game, and it's going to go through the NC State game. We understand that. I thought Saturday was as much on him as it's been on any point in time this year, because I thought there were throws there to be made that simply he did not or cannot make. And I don't want to absolve Freddie Kitchens completely. I think his game plan can be called into question. His play calling can be called into question. It almost felt like once Carolina got into field goal range, they were just satisfied coming away with points. And they were nowhere near, I felt, as aggressive as they needed to be chasing 6. They were just, well, we'll play for 3 so we don't come away with nothing. And, with the defense not being able to keep Wake Forest out of the end zone, well, last time I checked, 7's greater than 3. And so Carolina kept settling for field goal after field goal, but no, 2 field goals don't even match a full touchdown. So you got to kick 3 field goals to make up for the 1 touchdown you gave up. Well, you give up, 4 touchdowns. That's a lot of field goals you got to kick. And so it was frustrating because I thought there were times where there were plays to be made that Carolina just simply wasn't good enough, tough enough to make those plays. On the flip side, I think you would have liked to seen the aggression that Wake Forest showed once they crossed the Carolina 50, trickeration play, stuff like that, from the Carolina side of things to try to exploit Wake Forest defense. That never happened, and all in all, it was another dull offensive performance for Carolina.
Well, I mean, it would help if your mobile quarterback could be able to run the football in your offense. But as we, heard during the broadcast, they have done a really good job of making sure that Gio doesn't get hurt. That was basically what was said on the broadcast. Well, I don't really understand how that makes any sense because, yeah, of course, you're taking care of your quarterback. But at the same time, you're limiting what he can do, what makes him a successful quarterback, what made him a successful quarterback at his last stop at South Alabama, where they were using him, his legs very often. And guess what? His offensive coordinator was the guy that was coordinating against you the other night on the offensive side of the ball, and Robbie Zell. And you could see how good of a job he did putting Robbie Ashford into those running situations. He knew when to run them, and it seemed like just about every run was very effective. That should have been what the Carolina offense looked like this year with Gio Lopez at the helm, because that's ultimately where he's going to be most successful, is in an offense that really leans heavily on the run game, that allows him to be able to use his legs and sets him up to where he can hit plays, either in the short or intermediate passing game, and then eventually, maybe hit a shot downfield or 2 per game like we saw earlier in the season. In terms of his performance in this game, I mean, yeah, Gio Lopez was just not good. I mean, 21 of 36, 201 yards, 0 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. And maybe that's a little bit harsh because, again, he, like Carolina's offense in general, was pretty good inside or before you got down to the 40-yard line of Wake Forest. Once you got to that 40-yard line, everything seemed to get pretty much shut off. You look, Jake Johnson, pretty successful night, 5 catches, 54 yards. Kobe Paysour, 5 catches, 40 yards. Jordan Shipp, 4 catches, 31 yards. Those numbers were solid, but it didn't seem like he could find any of those guys once they got inside of that Wake 40. And the pass to Paysour, that's one that, yeah, I mean, you just have to find a way to keep that in bounds. That's not a difficult throw. He was open. He was open earlier in the route. That was certainly something that he should have seen, should have been able to drive that ball in there a lot earlier and wouldn't have had to worry about him going out of the back of the end zone. But he didn't see it. He sees it late. He throws it and overthrows it and leads his receiver out of the back of the end zone. That's one in a game like this you just have to have. Now, the thing is that he did have one pass in particular. It was really 2, but one pass in particular that should have been caught and would have led to a big play, and that was the pass that he threw to Jalen McGill. Look, Jalen McGill is a true freshman. He's a guy that should still be in high school. Coming in as a member of the 2026 class, reclassifying to the 2025 class to be a part of this team this year. I mean, he definitely is a guy that should not have been out there in that situation. They have put him out there a lot here in these last few weeks. He has not had the ball thrown his way. And I think we can see why now, because he's just not ready for that type of stage. Not yet. Maybe eventually he becomes a guy that can be a receiving back for you. But he had 2 tough drops. And after that first drop, I don't know why they put him back out there for that second play where he ends up dropping the ball on what was a beautifully thrown ball from Gio Lopez. So I felt like those were the two biggest plays in the game in terms of the offensive side of the ball, where Carolina had a chance to, score, but both times Carolina comes up empty on those scoring opportunities. I mean, yeah, McGill would have been down at the 5-yard line, but it would have set Carolina up perfectly on a drive where, if I remember that drive correctly, that was one of the blocked field goals for Carolina there in the third quarter. So certainly, one that you would like to have back if you're Carolina. And again, it goes into something that we've talked about, is just having the right personnel on the field for situations like that, something that we haven't really seen all season long because they've been rotating so heavily.
Yeah, absolutely. When he dropped the ball, the first thing that I yelled was, how the bleep do you drop that? Second off, why are we putting that kid in that situation to make that mistake anyway? And I think if there's one thing that this staff has not figured out through, now 10 games and 2 bye weeks, they've not figured out how to properly utilize the talent and maximize the skilled position talent that they have, and put these guys in positions to make plays, because every week you see different guys being put out there in different formations, different settings, and they're being asked to make plays that they're just not capable of making right now. And that's okay, because you mentioned he's a reclassified high school senior. The guy should be playing high school football. He shouldn't be playing ACC football, but there he is. But he makes a drop in a game that if he catches that, maybe Carolina finally breaks through. Maybe Carolina gets into the end zone. How different is the game? And I think what's really frustrating is Carolina's doing this knowing how thin their margin for error is. Like, it's different if you have a high-flying, free-flowing offense where you're just moving the ball up and down the field, and you're moving at such a pace, man, where you got to put these dudes in because these other guys are just that damn tired. That ain't the case. You're a slow, methodical, prodding offense that only, schemes up 3 to 5 of those plays per game as it is. You got to maximize those plays. Those got to be home runs. Those can't be singles, doubles, or even triples. And the problem is, most times they've been outs for Carolina. And that's what that was the other night. So I think the good news is that from some reporting and some intel around the program, we don't expect Freddie Kitchens to be back as Carolina's offensive coordinator and play caller in 2026. And hopefully whatever Bill Belichick requires and demands out of his next offensive coordinator hire, it's someone to maximize the talent that's on the roster. Because I think Carolina has more talent than what their offensive numbers would suggest. But after 10 games, I can only say that so much. You are what your record says you are. You are what the stat sheet says you are. The stat sheet says this is not a good offense, and we saw that in more ways than one on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, I think you brought up a good point. Where it would make a lot more sense if you were a high-flying offense that just needed to throw some guys out there because, hey, we're running at such a fast pace that, we just have to have somebody fresh in the game, because right now the way that we're going, we're up to the line of scrimmage, we're snapping the ball within 4 or 5 seconds, and we're really just running this team into the ground. That's not what's happening at all. These guys are getting plenty of rest. In terms of the in-between plays, it shouldn't be a unit that should be that worn down. It's really just them trying to create mismatches with personnel. And I get it to a certain extent. That's certainly something that is NFL-esque. You see that teams have certain packages for certain guys and everything like that. But I mean, yeah, when you're talking about a true freshman running back coming into the game, and this is a guy that you haven't used, they haven't thrown the ball to him in any of these situations when he's been out there. All of a sudden in this game, we need you to catch 2 huge passes for us. And when they go through his hands, who are we supposed to point the blame at? I think people are saying, hey, we're supposed to blame the player for the lack of execution. But I mean, yeah, put a guy on the field. Like, you look at what Davian Goss did last week for you, receiving wise. Why would you not want to have that guy on the field catching the football for you and having the ball in his hands after the play? Because he brings, similar explosiveness to what you're going to get from Jalen McGill after the catch. So I think that would have made more sense if he was the guy, if he was the back in the game. I mean, the thing is that, it's not just in the passing game that you see this personnel. I mean, look at it. In this game, one of the things that we were talking about during the game was that Javarius Green plays most of this game in the slot for Carolina. A few weeks ago, we weren't even seeing Javarius Green enter the game for Carolina. He wasn't even a guy that they were using. They had turned their attention to Madrid Tucker. They had turned their attention to Shenard Clower earlier in the season. So they've alternated with these different guys. And I get it, man. Maybe certain guys aren't performing in practice that week, so you're looking to somebody else to step up. But at some point, you've got to have some continuity with this group. And they did it again at running back, man. And this one just drives me insane. Last week, you had Davian Goss, the most successful guy out of the backfield in terms of running the football and catching the football. And guess what? In this game, he doesn't see the field really at all and doesn't register a single carry or a single catch for Carolina. How does that make any sense? And I get it, man. You wanted to use Damon June a little bit more in this game. 9 carries, 32 yards. That's fine. It's, to me, what drives me crazy is how are you still using Benjamin Hall over Davian Goss? And it may sound like I'm picking on Benjamin Hall, but it's more about, I really think Davian Goss brings something to this offense that the other two guys don't bring. They don't bring that speed, that change of gear that Carolina needs after you get Damon June in there. I think that was what they needed in this game if they were going to be able to successfully run the ball. They don't, and that's part of the reason why they run the football 24 times for 56 yards. Again, another dismal performance that just isn't helping this offense at all. You know what would have helped inside of the Wake 40 is if you were able to run the football a little bit when you got down there and the field shortened itself. But Carolina was never really able to do that. And I think a big part of that is that they just won't stick with a consistent rotation in the backfield. Every other spot, they seem to have situational guys that they're using. But in the backfield, it really feels like they're just throwing stuff up against the wall and seeing what sticks every week.
Yeah. I think this run game has hit a wall because I think with all the things the offensive line has gone through, I think that's caught up to them. Okay, fine. I can't excuse that. That's football. I don't think you could have prepared to have 2 guys leave the team in the first month and all the injuries that have piled up ever since then. But you got to combat that. And I thought what was really frustrating is that I thought they did a really good job with Damon June just hitting those 2, 3, 4-yard runs up the middle. And I thought they had set a level of physicality in that area to where I thought they had maybe softened up Wake Forest on the perimeter. And if you just get the ball on the outside and you seal those 1 or 2 blocks that Davian Goss needs, and then you let his speed and his talent take over, then there was more runs there to be had. And that was never a part of the game plan, because the problem with running Benjamin Hall isn't just the fact that he's not as good a running back as Davian Goss. He's a similar runner to Damon June. Like there's not that quick burst element. He's a physical runner that's going to finish drives, and there's something to be or finish runs. There's something to be said about that, sure. But you got to have speed, man. Whenever you see teams that typically have multiple running backs, they have different running styles. You don't see teams run the same type of runner over and over and over again while splitting the carries. They would just run the same guy over and over again, but that's not the way Carolina has decided to do things. What also doesn't make any sense is, okay, neither, your running backs never got their footing. They never got into a rhythm. So why are you not running your quarterback? Why are you not utilizing his biggest asset? His biggest asset is his legs and his ability to make plays, whether it's on the run or pulling the ball down and running. And he ran for over 400 yards at South Alabama last year. That's something to scoff at, man, at the quarterback position when he was probably running, I don't know, 6, 8, 10, maybe 12 times per game. But he was an efficient runner. And so and that's, again, where it just feels like offensively Carolina's behind the 8 ball. I think they've caught up defensively, and they made the adjustment they had to make to give their defense a chance. Same thing can't be said about what they need to do on offense. And Saturday was just another example of that. And we're being honest, man, if this is the level of offensive production Carolina's going to get in their final 2 games, I mean, if they split, it would be a miracle, because you're going up against 2 teams in the next 2 weeks that are bad defensively, but are a lot more explosive on offense and can put up the type of points in a much more quicker manner than what Wake Forest did, which puts you in a position where you're having to chase points pretty early on. And as we saw on Saturday, this offense isn't built to do it. They're not equipped to do it, and that starts and ends with their inability to run the football.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to have to put up something. You're going to have to put up some sort of fight in terms of these 2 games down the stretch of the season, because you could say, well, maybe these defenses are just that bad that Carolina will be able to score against them. You can't bank on that. You can't just expect that these defenses are going to be so poor that, hey, we're going to be able to run the football and we're going to be able to complete passes magically all of a sudden. I don't think that's going to happen. I know that, Carolina's offensive line was better the other day. I still don't think they're great. I still don't think they're doing what they need to do in run blocking situations. I thought they were decent in pass protection, but I still think in run blocking, they leave a lot to be desired. Now, I don't think that was the biggest issue the other day. I think that giving Benjamin Hall 8 carries where he was just ineffective outside of a 15-yard run was certainly a bigger issue. And yeah, if you would ran more off tackle, I think it's the kind of runs that Carolina has been calling these last couple of weeks that have been incredibly frustrating. There was stuff off tackle. They ran a couple of times with Damon June out on the edge, and it ended up picking up pretty decent yardage. And guess what they did? They chose to go away from it for some reason, because that's what they did the majority of the time whenever something would work. I didn't really get the fact that Carolina, even in a game, I know they were trailing, but you weren't trailing by that much. They kind of, leaned into the pass game a little bit heavier than I thought they should have in this one, especially when you see how ineffective that deep passing game was for Carolina. It became predictable what they were going to do. And so I think that's certainly something that has to be worked on in these final 2 games. Doesn't really matter once the season is over, because I think that this game showed you, if there was any hope for Freddie Kitchens to come back, that is out the window. I didn't think there was, but that is definitely out the window after a performance like this. First time that Carolina hasn't scored a touchdown. This was sent to me by Myron Goodman, our good friend and listener to the podcast here. He sent to me, that's the first time in 9 years that Carolina did not score a touchdown in a game. That is a pathetic look for Freddie Kitchens when you had such an important game here against Wake Forest, a game that could have gotten you on the doorstep of a bowl game, and you come out with that game plan that leads to no touchdowns and 6 field goal attempts. So simply have to be better on that side of the ball. And then you go over to the defensive side of the ball. Man, this was the first test for Carolina really in a while, mainly for their run defense, and they failed miserably. This is just the second time this year that they've allowed more than 200 rushing yards, 223 yards on the ground. Now, that was aided by the 51-yard fumble recovery for a touchdown that they listed as a running play. But still, Damon Claiborne, 23 carries, 98 yards and a touchdown. Seemed like every time that he needed to rip off a big run for them, even if it wasn't big in terms of the amount of yards, but important runs, he seemed to, always come through in the clutch. Robbie Ashford made some clutch plays as well. 10 carries, 52 yards, and a touchdown. That 5.2 yards per carry certainly not going to lead to a lot of success when you're allowing the quarterback to be able to do that. And something that we noticed really right out of the gate, and it lasted all day, was Carolina's interior defensive line just getting pushed around. This was a group that I thought before the Stanford game was doing a really good job. I thought a little bit in that Stanford game, you could see it. There were moments that they were starting to get pushed around a little bit. But when you have the type of day that Carolina's edge rushers did in terms of getting to the quarterback, sort of skewed the rushing yards just a little bit, even though they didn't allow a ton to the backs, you could still see that there were times where they were being pushed around a little bit. This game, Wake dominated on the interior, and that was with one of their offensive guards going down multiple times due to injury, but it didn't matter who was in there for Wake Forest. It seemed like there was just a constant push up front from their offensive line, and that made a huge difference in this game and was something that unfortunately Carolina's defense was never able to really adjust to or counteract.
Yeah, what's the most demoralizing thing in football as a fan, player, coach is watching your team not be able to stop the run. And you mentioned you got the 51-yard fumble that gets added to the run total that does skew it to where they goes to 223, but you take away those 51 yards, it's down like $152, but it was a big $152 because it felt like virtually anytime Wake Forest wanted to line up and run the ball, Carolina could get 4 yards. And that had been happening the past month. That hasn't been happening as frequently as we're used to seeing it as Carolina fans, because Carolina, as I've told you all year long, they've done a really good job in their run fits, and they've done a really good job filling gaps and making tackles. And for whatever reason, they took a step back the other day. I think part of it is Wake Forest's offensive line is probably better than people think because they look at little old Wake Forest and, they don't got the offensive line talent. But that's a physical group up front that I thought was able to take advantage of some of the undersized defensive linemen that we've talked about this year that have played really well here recently. But in a game where it was going to be a line of scrimmage game, how are they going to hold up? And it just felt like Carolina got worn down. And once you get worn down, the first thing you do is you start reaching, you start grabbing, and you quit tackling. And that's effectively what happened. There wasn't, outside of the fumble, there wasn't like a run or two that really stood out that breaks the statistics in one way or another. It was just consistent running of the football, kind of like what you see when you see, the service academies, where it's just 3 yards here, 4 yards here, 5 yards there. So 3rd and 2, well, we're going to run it at you, and you're not going to be able to stop it. And that's what happened. It's frustrating. But, because you felt like with the way you played the last month that maybe that was behind you. And there were times where I thought Carolina was going to get that stop. They're going to, Melcart's going to break through and make the play. Tyler Thompson's going to break through and make the play. Smith Filbert's going to break through, make the play. And those things just never happened the way they had happened previously. And you kind of see the limitations of this defense when they could not stop the run. I thought their linebackers had maybe their worst game since TCU. I don't know how they graded out. But it felt like, I thought Kamori House at times was terrible. I thought his effort at times was terrible. I thought his body language at times was terrible. And all that kind of culminated in the worst defensive showing here since the Clemson game. So, they're as upset and as frustrated, as beaten up as we are. The guys that are the most beat up are the players, because the defense knows what they got to do to give this team a chance. And if the defense is being honest with you, I think they tell you they didn't play well enough to win on Saturday, and that's certainly the case.
Yeah, I mean, you look at some of the grades, guys that had graded out really well all year long. Leroy Jackson, the worst Pro Football Focus grade for Carolina out of anybody on the team. Isaiah Johnson, 18th on the team the other day, a guy who had been playing so well for Carolina in run defense, had maybe his lowest run grade of the entire season at a 56.9. I looked at it. It is the lowest run grade that he's had all year long. So, I mean, to have him struggling the way that he did Leroy Jackson, easily the worst game that he's had all year long, especially in run defense. That was certainly something that didn't help Carolina. Kamori House graded out as the second worst player for Carolina defensively with a 47.2. That was easily the second worst grade that he's had all season long. The worst grade came in the game against Clemson. But part of the reason why this game it was so bad for him was because he was, picked on a little bit in the middle of the field receiving wise. 5 catches allowed on 5 targets for 104 yards, in this one. Certainly not great from his perspective. Did allow a touchdown as well. And that is, yes, the second perfect passer rating that he has allowed this season. The only other game where he was as bad as this, actually this game graded out worse in coverage than he did in that game. That would be the Clemson game where he allowed 2 catches for 58 yards, and both of those went for touchdowns. So he was a big part of the reason why the middle of the field was, as wide open as it was for most of the day. Missed tackles, as I said, were a big part of it for this defense. There's no doubt about that. And he had, multiple missed tackles early in the game. You pointed him out as someone that made a mistake on the flea flicker play that allowed for the long touchdown to Carlos Hernandez. Another one that, really, you look at all the touchdowns that Carolina allowed in this game, all of them were avoidable. One of them was not their fault that they didn't avoid it, but all of them were seemingly avoidable touchdowns that they let up because this defense just did not bring it the way that we had seen in previous weeks. And that's what's so dejecting, man. When you get a group that's as good as this group was for the last 4 weeks, and you start getting that feeling that you've got a successful group that's able to help you on that side of the ball for the first time in years, it is crushing when this group gets torn apart. And I think that's what you saw. It was the defensive line that wasn't necessarily as good as they've been. They weren't able to get anywhere near as much pressure on the quarterback as they were able to in previous weeks. And I think that was a big part of why they struggled. You look at from Milcart Abujade, just 1 pressure in this game. The most pressures came from Andrew Simpson at the linebacker spot, but nobody else on the team had more than 1 pressure. They had just 11 total pressures in the entire game, but somehow came up with 4 sacks. That's what's crazy is that, because of, Robbie Ashford plays that they didn't mark down as runs, Carolina still came away with 4 sacks in this game, but it certainly wasn't as impactful as it had been in previous weeks. And, the other part of it is that they were getting the ball out quick and allowing these guys to do a lot after the catch. 166 of the 191 receiving yards for Wake Forest came after the catch. That is not a recipe for success. When you're allowing that many yards after the catch, that's something that we saw early in the season from Carolina. The last time that we really saw them struggle with that was Cal, another game where they gave up a decent amount of points and lost. That was a big reason why they lost that game, and that's a big reason why they end up losing this game as well. All right, now let's get into the end of the game, because this is something that a lot of people were wanting to talk about. A lot of people were fired up about this, and I saw a lot of opinions on social media that were basically saying that Wake Forest was in the wrong and that it wasn't Carolina. That Carolina did nothing to deserve it. I think that thought is just ridiculous. I saw the exact reason why Wake Forest decided to run that ball in and put up more points against Carolina at the end, really rub it in. Because Carolina is celebrating. Keep in mind, down 9, you're about to lose the game because there was no way that you were going to get the football back 2 times and be able to celebrate and be able to score. They were celebrating stopping guys on short run plays, on second and goal and third and goal. Carolina ends up stopping them for 2 1-yard gains, and apparently they thought this was making up for the entire game because they were celebrating like they were about to win this game. 21-12 as opposed to being down 21-12. And so then you get a timeout from Bill Belichick, which is one of the weirdest things that you will ever see. I still don't know why he called that timeout. To be honest with you, I wonder if part of him decided to call that timeout just to say, hey, I'm sending a message to you guys that this is unacceptable, whatever you're doing out here, almost wanting Wake Forest to score on them at the end of the game to basically say, hey, quit celebrating. You didn't accomplish anything. You guys are celebrating a loss. And so I hope that's what happened, because I think they deserve to get a touchdown scored on them. You should not be out there talking trash when you're losing. That's just a pathetic look. It's ridiculous. For fans at home, what do they have to be happy about? They're happy that you're stopping guys on 2nd and goal and 3rd and goal while you're down by 9, while the clock ticks under a minute to go. It's just a pathetic look, man. It shows that this culture is not anywhere near where it needs to be. And again, I don't know how much of that is on Coach Belichick. I don't know how much of it is on the players who are just not buying into it. I'm going to tell you right now, man, no New England player would have celebrated being down by 9 with under a minute to go in a game. They expected to win every single time that they stepped on the field. So celebrating something so minute as making late stops in the game on run plays is just a pathetic look for this group. And I honestly made me angry as a fan. I was pissed off watching that. I could not believe. I was yelling at them, what are you celebrating? Because for the life of me, I could not figure out why you would be celebrating in that moment. So I actually sort of like what Wake Forest did there at the end, saying, hey, if you're going to talk trash, then we're going to score another touchdown on you. And hopefully that was a humbling experience for this group that needs to stop acting the way that they were, not only during the game, towards the end of the game, but then after the game, going after Wake Forest players on the field, going and jawing back and forth after what was clearly a loss that you just have to take and walk away and go home and get prepared for the game against Duke. That was not the way that Carolina took it, though.
Yeah, I was not a fan of the way Carolina handled the final 2 minutes. Wasn't a fan of the way that Bill Belichick handled the post-game handshake either. You just come across as small. No one likes losing, and if you want to be frustrated, I'll sit here and applaud that. I'll commend that because it shows that you care. Running your mouth while getting your ass kicked, I mean, you just look like a coward. I don't mean to be blunt or harsh, but that's coward behavior. If you're winning, talk all you want. You've earned the right. But Wake Forest kicked your ass physically. They have the right to talk trash to you. And to Jake Dicker's credit, they weren't trying to score a touchdown. They weren't kneeling, but they were pretty much just handing the ball off, and Carolina was wrapping up at the line of scrimmage, and we're trying to get out of here. And then all of a sudden, our head coach, who quit trying to win the game the final 3.5 minutes, all of a sudden was
punted for some reason.
With 27 seconds left to go in the ball game, whatever it is, wants to call timeout. So I had absolutely no issue with what Wake Forest did. I, with you, commended it and applauded it because I would have done the same thing. For them, they're having a really good season. We know how important it is for that program to beat Carolina. I mean, we worked with the Wake Forest alumnus that played football there. We know how I know how he feels about us. We know how that program feels about us. I said it today. I know they beat a ranked Virginia team the week before. This is the biggest win on the schedule for them. Mm-hmm. That program lives and exists to beat Carolina. And they had a chance to rub it in. And then I feel bad for Jake Dickert, man. Like, here he is on his way to maybe being the ACC Coach of the Year, gets a big win at home, can look other coaches in the eye and say, I beat Bill Belichick. How many great NFL coaches can't say that? But Jay Dickert can say, I beat Bill Belichick. And instead of our head coach going over, shaking his hand and applauding him and giving him that reverence and that respect, he big times him. And now Jake Dickert can never have that moment of embrace where what Bill Belichick should have been doing was patting him on the back and saying, you coached a hell of a game. You've got a hell of a team. Congratulations to you. I know where I got to get better. And it just, for all the ABCers out there, it's just more ammo to the fire for the way we act when we lose. And that's what it was on Saturday. Was whatever ABCers say about Carolina whenever they lose, that's how we looked. That's how we acted. That's what we demonstrated. And as a fan that tries to push back against that narrative, it was really disappointing to see it play out in real life.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, look, some people said to me that it shouldn't be the most shocking thing that Belichick acts like this because of the type of personality that he has. But I've always thought that Belichick had respect for other coaches. I mean, you rarely see this move from him where he just blows guys off. But he did. He did that in this game. That was a really, really bad look. Just the stamp on what was just a really bad look overall for Carolina. I mean, what did he do in that moment? I mean, you were the one that called the timeout. If it was the other way around, if he had called a timeout while he was down by 9, you probably would have did the same thing because it didn't make any sense at that point. So, I mean, he should be mad at himself for calling the timeout. Wake Forest literally had run a play. They did not have to run another play when you called timeout. They were going to just let the game end right there. It was going to be 21-12, and that was going to be where you walked off at. You were the one that called timeout, so you have to answer to that if you're Bill Belichick as to why you did that. And we haven't heard an explanation from him. I mean, I don't remember seeing anything from the postgame about why he decided to call timeout right there. It could be that the question wasn't asked. It could be that he just chose not to answer that question. But it was just a bad look overall for the program. It's a bad look overall for, as you said, the fan base as well now has to deal with this, that, your coach literally can't shake hands walking off the field. Your players are, just for some reason going after Wake Forest players. And here's the sad part. You say that Wake Forest could have talked trash because they were winning the game. They weren't even the ones that were talking trash to begin with. It started because Carolina was celebrating the fact that they were stopping guys in meaningless scenarios. So if you don't celebrate that, which you shouldn't celebrate that, what have you accomplished? You've accomplished nothing. You've stopped a guy on 2 plays that meant absolutely nothing to the game, meant nothing to the season. And you decided in that moment, this is when we're going to celebrate. You didn't celebrate the rest of the game. We didn't see moments like that at all. Now, there wasn't much to celebrate because you guys did not play well. But at the same time, that was the moment that you chose to celebrate while down 9 with under a minute to go. I mean, come on, guys. Seriously. And you could say, well, these guys are student athletes. You know what? It doesn't matter. We have always held this team accountable, and we're going to continue to do that. That was a really poor decision from those guys on the field the other day. You've got to be bigger than that, man. Like, you've got to know that, hey, we're celebrating for no reason here. What are we doing? And after the game, just get off the field, man. You got your ass whooped. This is a team that, deserved the win. And here's the other thing. You're not at home. They weren't disrespecting you in any way in terms of, stomping on your logo, planting a flag on your logo, anything like that. So to me, it just doesn't really make any sense. It felt like they brought it upon themselves and got what they deserved. And that's an unfortunate close to this game because, this was a game that was hard fought. That was one thing that I didn't think you could question from Carolina's perspective, was that the effort was pretty much there the entire game. But this moment at the end really pissed me off. And I'm, glad that, Wake Forest was able to score on them and hopefully give them something to look back on and really reevaluate themselves after, because that was just a pathetic look for Tar Heel football there at the end of the game. Now let's get to the ultimate question, because I asked this question because, as I said, I was told by multiple people today that we should be back where we were after the Clemson loss. Our coworker Smoke Ludwig told me that. There were multiple people on the text line that told me something similar, that, we should be right back where we were after the Clemson loss, because everything that Carolina did during the previous 4 weeks was taken away by what happened on Saturday in Winston-Salem. You say no, that should not be the case. Why do you say that?
Well, because I don't want to take away from the 2 wins that Carolina earned and they fought for. And you still have a chance to achieve what the goal was, what the goal became when we reevaluated expectations in the middle of the year. You can still make a bowl game. And so I guess until Carolina can't do that, then maybe I'm not willing to go that way. And also, you lost to a good football team on the road, man. Like, this wasn't like you lost to 1-9 Boston College. You lose to 1-9 Boston College, maybe we're having a conversation about this. You lost on the road against a team that's in a position to have a 10-win season this year. Is a blown call and a blown lead away from maybe playing for the ACC championship. So I don't want to diminish who we lost to in the process, and I think that's what you're doing if you're admitting that, well, this loss means you're back to square one with where you were before you won the 2 games and how close you were when you almost won at Cal, when you almost won at Virginia. I think what it was just a really good reminder of the growth that Carolina's experienced, but how far they still got to go to get to that tier of teams in the ACC, which Wake Forest is a second-tier team in the conference right now. And so we'll see what Carolina does here the rest of the way. But I didn't get that feeling. I was disappointed and I was frustrated because I thought the game was really winnable. Because I never thought that Wake Forest put the game away like they should have with just our inability to score touchdowns. But no, I don't think that's the case, because I thought Carolina still competed to a really good level, and it was a 14-12 ball game, folks. Like, they were there. Like, yeah, they were there. This wasn't like it was 21-3 and Carolina had to make some comeback. Like, there was game pressure on Wake Forest in the fourth quarter. So those people that are saying that, guess what they are? They're ABCers, and they're loving seeing where Carolina is at, and they want to kick them while they're down, because I still think you saw a team that fought and scratched and competed really hard. Just they're not where Wake Forest is right now. That's the unfortunate reality of the situation, but it does not undo all the work they did the previous month going 2-2.
Yeah, I mean, look, there were Tar Heel fans that were telling me this, and I believe that those people believe that it's so bad because they just look at the quarterback play. That's what I got from most people, is that really, the reason why this game didn't go the way that it was supposed to is because they don't have the right quarterback. They don't have the right OC. They should have fired Freddie Kitchens midseason. They should have a different quarterback in there. And now, I mean, you're at the point in the season where you're not going away from Gio Lopez as your starting quarterback. If you have any chance to win the last 2 games, it is not going to be with freshmen in there. It's not going to be Arturi Newkirk. It's not going to be Bryce Baker. Those guys are not going to lead you to a bowl game. It's not going to happen. To me, putting them in those situations wouldn't be fair to them, because you're honestly setting them up with expectations that are just too much for them at that rate. After they have had basically no reps with the ones so far this year, you would be giving them 1 week of practice, maybe, if you decided to make that decision right after the game to work with these guys. And to me, it doesn't make any sense that they would actually do that. I know there are people that believe that's the direction that they should go, but I don't think that's what's going to actually end up happening. I think Carolina is probably going to roll Gio Lopez out there for the last 2 games, and you're just going to have to hope things break the right way for Carolina. You have to hope mainly that the running game comes back for Carolina. But in terms of the thought that this takes away everything from the last 4 games, I'm with you. I think if you had seen what you saw against Clemson, where there was basically no effort, where you just thought to yourself, yeah, there is absolutely no way that Carolina is going to win this game. They're getting blown off the field. And you basically were watching a team that just laid down and rolled over on the season, then yeah, okay, maybe then we can start to have the conversation about this was This takes away everything from what they did the last 4 weeks. But I saw a team that fought, and you're right. I think you have to give credit to Wake Forest. Wake is a much better team than a lot of us thought coming into the year. And as you said, early in the podcast, this is a team that's, if they make the right call against Georgia Tech, they're a 2-loss team. If they don't blow the lead against, who did they blow the lead against that I'm forgetting early in the season? NC State?
I believe that's correct.
Yeah, it was NC State. I thought it was NC State, but I didn't want to roll with it if it was incorrect. If they don't blow that game, well, then all of a sudden you're talking about a 1-loss team. You're talking about a team that would be in Charlotte, ladies and gentlemen, would probably be playing in Charlotte for the ACC championship. So Jake Dickert's done an amazing job there for them so far this year. I think he deserves a lot of credit. He deserves credit for this game. He came in with a good game plan, and Carolina just got beat by a better team. But I didn't see this team quit on the season. We'll see what happens when they take the field against Duke. I do think that you can get back to that place that you were after the Clemson game. If Carolina comes out, loses these next 2 games, and doesn't look competitive in these games, which I think is a possibility because of the offenses that they are facing, then we can get to that point. As long as Carolina looks competitive, I don't think you're going to get back to that point, but you can still think that the season is a massive disappointment, even if you don't get back to that point. And I think that's kind of where I'm at right now. We sit here, I look at those last 2 games of the season, and, based off of what we've seen, I don't know that Carolina is going to win one of those last 2 games. I mean, we'll have to wait and see. I think they probably win one of them to get to 5-7. I don't know which one of them it is, to be honest with you. If I had to choose which one I prefer, I would prefer to beat State rather than beat Duke. I know that for some people might rub them the wrong way, especially with the game being at home for Carolina against Duke. But I would much rather beat State to close out the year than the other way around. But I mean, yeah, it is possible that this team goes 4-8, and you could still say this is a pretty big disappointment for this group. So we'll have to see how it plays out. But, certainly not saying that the season is over and that Carolina absolutely has no chance to make a bowl game. It's just they have to clean up a lot of things that they did the other day and get back to playing the type of football that they were playing during that 4-week stretch that allowed them to find 2 wins, nearly beat Virginia, a team that looks like they might go to Charlotte for the ACC championship game, and almost come away with a win on the road at Cal. So that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the podcast, guys. Make sure you head over to the website, HeelToughBlog.com. Check out everything that we got over there. We got the recap of this game against Wake Forest, where I go a little more in depth on some of my biggest takeaways from this game. So basically, all the stuff that we talked about here in the podcast, go a little more in depth on that. So make sure you go and check that out over on the website. Of course, any recruiting news that comes out, we will have you covered. I did not put up the article last week, but we are going to put up an article about a guy that is visiting this week, a 4-star running back that Carolina is hosting for an official visit. Not sure whether or not they're going to have an actual chance to land him, but the fact that Carolina is even getting an official visit, a big step in the right direction. So make sure that you check that out when we post that for you guys here later tonight or early tomorrow morning. Probably going to go with early tomorrow morning, seeing that it's already 9 o'clock here on the East Coast. But make sure that you check that out for us, and then we'll keep you up to date on what is expected to be a big official visit weekend for Carolina this weekend. Any other news that comes out around the team, if the injury report has something significant in it, like it did last week, we're going to make sure that we get it to you this week. Thaddeus Dixon, an update on him will certainly be in there. So hopefully we can see him out there for Carolina in this upcoming game against the Duke Blue Devils. And we'll keep you up to tabs when that first availability report comes out. Basketball side of things, Carolina getting ready to take on Navy. Josh will have that preview for you in the morning, so make sure that you check that out. And then we'll have you covered. He will have the recap for you on Wednesday morning that you'll be able to check out, and we'll have you covered on the podcast side of things, talking about that game sometime on Wednesday for you. That'll run Wednesday evening, so make sure that you are checking that out in the same places that you check out this podcast, whether it is on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube, especially that YouTube channel. We have been hammering that home for you guys. So make sure that you go and check out that YouTube channel if you could. If you are not a subscriber already to the channel, smash that subscribe button. And then also make sure if you are somebody that watches the podcast, you watch it over there on YouTube. That would really help us out if you could do that. So, that's going to wrap it up once again for this edition of the podcast. Want to thank Josh for hosting with me. Want to thank you guys for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.